Okay, so this is a quick lesson about foreign exchange. So when you travel from one country, Denmark for example, to another country, England, you often need to change your money. So krona to pounds, krona to euro, euro to pounds, dollars, whatever. Now a good method for doing this involves finding out how much one unit of a currency is worth. Here's an example of what I mean by this. So Martine has 200 Swiss francs, which she changes into euros. And the exchange rate that she's been given is 1 euro is equal to 1.14 Swiss francs. So we have to calculate how much she received. Okay, so we know how much 1 euro is worth. 1 euro is worth 1.14 Swiss francs. That's the exchange rate we've given. But she's got 200 Swiss francs, so we'd like to know what 200 Swiss francs is worth. So it would be a good idea first to figure out what 1 Swiss franc is worth, and then we can multiply it up to figure out what 200 of them are worth. So at the moment we know that 1 euro is 1.14 Swiss francs. So to find out what 1 Swiss franc is worth, I'm going to have to divide everything by 1.14. So starting with 1 euro equals 1.14 Swiss francs, if I divide everything by 1.14, I find out how much 1 Swiss franc is worth. But then I've got to do the same the other side as well, so I've got to divide the 1 euro by 1.14. So that gives me that 1 Swiss franc is worth 1 over 1.14 euros. Okay, so that's what 1 Swiss franc is worth, but I'd like to know what 200 is worth, so I'm going to multiply everything by 200 in the next step. So 1 Swiss franc multiplied by 200 gives me my 200 Swiss francs, and then on the other side with the euros, so I started with 1 over 1.14 euros, and if I multiply that by 200, then I get 200 over 1.14, and 200 divided by 1.14 is 175.44 and a bit euros. So 175.44 euros is equal to 200 Swiss francs. But I do like this method of, before you find out the amount you want of something, find out what 1 of it is worth. So find out what 1 is worth is a big important method for me that applies not just to converting currencies, but it might be weights in different units of measurement, it might be distances, all sorts of things, kilometers to miles, those kinds of conversions. So my 175.44 euros has been rounded to 2 decimal places, and generally speaking, if you're working with money, it's usually 2 decimal places because you normally get 100 of something equals the big unit. Okay, so you need to take notes from that. So the previous page, that was the introduction, followed by this nice lined up working. See how the currency symbols all line up, see how the equal signs line up, and so on and so on. And I've tried to kind of color code things a little bit to make it a bit more helpful and easy to understand. So do pause the video to take notes from that. Now moving on, in Denmark, since we're in Denmark at the moment, but not everywhere, when you see the exchange rate, Danish word for exchange rate, kurs, it is telling you how many kroner you need for 100 of the other currency. Currency in Danish, valuta, in case you're interested. So a couple of key vocabulary words there. Okay, so this is the list of exchange rates published by Danske Bank on the particular day that I made this this little presentation. I think the British pound has got a lot weaker since then. Okay, and on this particular day, the exchange rate for euros was 756.3 7.37. So that tells you that if you want 100 euros, it's going to cost you 756.37 krona. All of these are the prices in krona of 100 of the other currency. So that is quite not necessarily a unique thing, but a thing that's peculiar to Denmark. Certainly if you're ever in England and you see an exchange rate, it's done in a different way, and the exchange rate is usually telling you, going back to the previous page of this, if I can get to the previous page, there we are, it's usually telling you something like that one of the currency that you're in is worth how so many of the other currency. So an exchange rate in England would say £1 equals $1.2 or whatever the current exchange rate is, but in Denmark it is a little bit different to in many other countries. The exchange rate tells you what it costs in krona to buy 100 of the other currency. Okay, so do take that note please, and pause the video to do so. Obviously you won't want to copy all of these. If you've got the possibility to do so, you might want to just print it out and stick that bit in, but do write these notes down. Okay, then moving on. Some examples. You want £300. How much does it cost in krona? So that's based on the exchange rates on the previous page, and on that you can't quite see it because I've covered it up with green, but the exchange rate for British pounds is 876.9 something that I still can't quite see, 93. So the exchange rate as shown on the previous page was 876.93, and that means that £100 is going to cost you 876.93. So I've got the amount of krona for £100. I'd like to know how much for £300. So as an in-between step, I'm going to figure out what £1 is worth. Always figure out what one of the thing that you're trying to get the value for is worth. Okay, so to get from £100 equals 876.93 krona to £1 equals 876.93 divided by 100, I've divided everything by 100. So I've divided everything by 100 to figure out what £1 is worth, but I want to know what £300 is worth, so I'm going to multiply everything by 100 to get what £300 is worth. So £300 is worth 876.93 times 300 divided by 100. And when you work that all out, it comes to £300 equals 2,630.79 to 2 decimal places krona. Okay, so you might have said to yourself, well, why don't I just go from the 100 to the 300 by multiplying it all by 3? And that would have been valid enough on this occasion, but if you do have the method of every time reducing something to how much 1 is worth, then you know it's always going to work. You know, you might not always have a situation where you're lucky that there's a nice round number you can multiply by to make everything work. Okay, so that was example 1 or question 1. Do copy that down, pause the video please. And moving on to example 2. You have 300 krona. How many pounds can you get? So again, the exchange rate that we're given is that £100 is equal to 876.93 krona. I want to know this time what 300 krona is worth, so I'm going to first figure out what 1 krona is worth. So I'm going to divide everything by 876.93 to get from the 876.93 krona to the 1 krona. So that tells me that 100 divided by 876.93 pounds is equal to 1 krona. But then I'd like to know what 300 kroner each, what 300 kroner is worth. So I multiply everything by 300 to get 300 kroner is equal to the thing I had before times 300. And when you work all of that out, it comes to £34.21. So £34.21 is roughly equal to 300 kroner. And that seems like a reasonable figure from what we know about the exchange rate from pounds and kroner. So always have a think to yourself, does that actually make sense in terms of what I know about these things? And I know that 300 kroner is worth a bit more than £30. So again, pause the video, take the note please.